than we have in our gospel this morning. If you have something against your sister or brother, leave the altar and go first to be reconciled to your sister or brother, and then come back to the altar. The attitude that we have to have when we worship, the attitude of a willingness to forgive. And isn't it true that that is the face of Jesus, the face of forgiveness? At the Last Supper with Judas, who was going to betray him, dipping the morsel into the cup with him, the bread into the cup, a sign of friendship, even as Judas was about to betray him, wanting to repair that relationship. As he hung on the cross, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Is not Jesus' face the face of forgiveness and mercy? I'd like to read a brief story to you from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, a beautiful story of forgiveness. Sometimes it seems impossible to forgive, for the act committed was too offensive. Here, Elizabeth Maughan could teach us many lessons about tolerance, love, anger, and forgiveness. Elizabeth has much to be angry about. When she was a teenager, she and her family were rounded up by the Nazis and sent to Auschwitz, a concentration camp where the average life expectancy was brief. Shortly after her arrival there, she asked the guard where the rest of her family was. He pointed to the smoke coming out of a massive chimney, saying, "That's where they are." After the camp was liberated by Allied soldiers, Elizabeth found herself in Denmark, waiting for a train to Sweden. There were other survivors with her, but her family was gone. "I was given a cup of coffee that tasted so good. I've never had anything to match it," she declares. A nurse brought in 2 women and a man, saying they were also concentration camp survivors. I suspected they were not, for they had bags with them. No one from a camp had luggage. We didn't even have an extra piece of cloth. These 2 women and the man started asking us questions about which camp we came from, how we got here. My fellow survivors shared their stories. The next morning, the train arrived to take us to Sweden. I was put in a compartment with the 2 women who had asked the questions, plus 3 others. There wasn't a lot of room in the car, especially with the suitcases the 2 women had brought. The 2 of them sat on the floor, the 3 others took a bench, and I climbed overhead to the place where you normally put the baggage. I heard a noise. Looking down, I saw that 2 women had opened one of the suitcases, and inside were photos of people in SS uniforms. The women were tearing the pictures up and throwing them out the window. You have to understand that no one in a camp would have had or even wanted to have pictures of the guards. Some officials got on the train at one of the stops and asked us all questions. When he asked the 2 women and the man where they had been, which camp, and so on, they recited the stories they had heard from my fellow inmates the night before. I could have said something, but I was so full of happiness that the war was over. I was convinced that every soul had learned from the war. I thought it was not my place to punish these people. If God wants to punish them, he will. We arrived in Sweden, and I never saw them again. What I did was not to condone what these people had done. It was to trust God that forgiveness was in God's hands, not mine. It wasn't my place to decide their fate. With all the people who had died, my little brother, my parents, how could I say it's okay, it doesn't matter? But it was important to me to never have the desire for revenge in my heart. I remember in the camp we would pass a bakery every morning as we were taken to clean the streets. We were always hungry, and that fresh baked bread aroma would hit us. We would say, when we are free, we will run to the bakery and eat up the bread. We never said we would run to the bakery and kill the baker. An amazing story. But her belief that to be whole in life, she had to be willing to forgive. And her belief that basically and ultimately you put things in God's hands and God will dole out justice. It's extraordinary considering her loss. And it makes me recall what Pope Francis said early on in his pontificate: who am I to judge? Who am I to judge? I will put it in God's hands. So, my sisters and brothers, let's look a little bit at some of the ideas of forgiveness. We need to forgive, to live whole lives. It hurts us more than the people that have wronged us. It hurts us more. And one of the problems is that we have no training or guidance on how to let hurts go. And this is where forgiveness comes in. Forgiveness. As Father Phil mentioned a couple of nights ago, one wonderful way to deal with anger is to take that step of forgiveness. And we can learn from dying people. Often dying people want to forgive before they die. Why can't we do this when we are alive? The dying do not say, I have been so right, and in being so right, I can see how wrong you have been. In my bigness, I will forgive you. No, the dying don't say that. What they think of is, you made mistakes, and so have I. Who hasn't? But I no longer want to define you by your mistakes, or have me defined by mine. So true. We all make mistakes. So what are the blocks to forgiveness? What makes it very difficult for us to forgive? We think that we, in forgiving, are condoning the bad behavior. That's not true. We forgive the person. We don't forgive the behavior. Forgiveness and justice can go hand in hand. And if situations change, mercy can appear. But forgiveness, justice, and under certain situations, mercy is so, so important. And that's what this Marriage and Family Synod is all about. Maybe the conditions have changed in a divorced and remarried, that mercy is what should be expected. And as Francis says, is not the face of God the face of mercy? So, we have to realize when we forgive the person that the person is better than his or her mistakes. And another block to forgiveness is certainly the desire for revenge. But the problem is we become what we hate. We become what we hate when we seek revenge. It's not the way to go. Lack of forgiveness keeps us stuck. Lack of forgiveness nurtures resentment. And one of the things that I love about recovery spirituality is there's two big demons in our life. One is fears. We all have our fears. The other is resentments. And we have to be cleansed of those. And not forgiving nurtures resentments. And they just stay in our blood system. Forgiveness is never easy. And it is important. The first step is to see whoever has wronged you as a human being again. They are like us, fragile and faulty. You have to see the humanness in the person who has wronged you. Become aware of your anger. Get the blocked energy out. Scream, sock a pillow. But it is important to get that energy out. And try to get to the feelings beneath the anger. Why you feel so angry. Is it sadness? Is it pain? Is it your own hurt that you feel you've been wronged? You have to let yourself feel these feelings, and finally, this is the hard part, you have to let those feelings go. You have to let those feelings go. Sometimes, my sisters and brothers, we can't forgive. And we're not God. My orthopedist used to tell me, you're good, but you're not God. Don't try to do what God can do. God can really forgive. And sometimes those wrongs are so deep that we can't forgive. And it is our responsibility to say, Lord, I can't do it. Give me the grace to be able to forgive this person. Throw the ball in God's court. But there are times we can't beat ourselves up when we can't forgive. And, my sisters and brothers, we often can't forgive ourselves as inadequate or even downright bad. That little girl, that teenage girl that I told you the story about at the beginning of this homily, this is what happened to her, Elizabeth Vaughn. When her family had arrived at Auschwitz, they stood before the armed guards, who asked her how old her brother was. She told them that he was 13. She said proudly that according to Jewish tradition, he was now a bar mitzvah, a man. After realizing that most young children and often their mothers were immediately sent to the gas chamber while the others were spared, she feared that her comment had marked her brother for death. Maybe if I hadn't said his real age, he would be alive. Maybe if I hadn't said anything, he would have survived. I often felt like I sent him to his death. To this day, Elizabeth misses her little brother and wonders, what if? She must continue to find forgiveness in her heart from this misplaced sense of responsibility. We have to forgive ourselves. We have to realize that we probably would have done things differently if we knew a better way. We all make mistakes. Accept it. So, my sisters and brothers, think of someone who forgave you, or someone whom you forgave. It's so important to know what forgiveness is. What I'd like to do in concluding this homily is just say something about what ties all these topics together. I mean, Father Phil and I have covered quite a few topics, 9 altogether. Authenticity, relationships, love, fear, patience, anger, surrender, happiness, forgiveness. Quite a boatload. Can you tie them up together?